I'm James Bolam and welcome to the Football Culture Podcast. Today's first episode is about football in Seville, which is in southern Spain in Andalusia. It's one of the most passionate football cities in Europe, arguably, and I'm here today with two guests, Mark Ambler and Pearson, and we're going to talk about the city, the region, the people, and of course the football clubs. Now, we're recording here in Seville, as we all live here, so that's why we thought this first episode would be a good place to start speaking about football in the city of Seville. So, Seville is a city with a population of around 680,000 people and is in Spain's most populous region of Andalusia. It's also its largest landmass. Seville has all of the things you would expect of Spain. It's kind of the city of the traditional idea that people have of Spain, of the bullfights, of the heat, of siestas, of tapas, and all these things included. So, Mark, why Seville? What's your background? Tell us, and why did you choose to live here?
I was offered a job with a tech company in 2011, and they offered me a job in 6 different cities. I'd never been to mainland Spain, and I Googled best weather in Spain, and it came back Seville, and that's why I chose here over Madrid or Valencia or Bilbao. I'm a Crystal Palace fan originally, and I've been season ticket for Sevilla for 11 years. I've just got my new season ticket today for next season.
Okay, cool. Weather's a good reason to come. And that's something that is quite unique about Seville compared to, say, somewhere like Madrid or Barcelona, is the climate. The winters can be surprisingly cold. The houses aren't really equipped to retain heat, so it can be very, very cold during the winter time, and it's actually often warmer out on the streets than it is indoors. But the summers are excruciatingly hot, often going over above 40 degrees. Today, it's around 26 degrees, which for June is quite a low temperature, so it's not too bad today. So the weather does permeate the culture of the city. People going out to eat late at night. The outdoor lifestyle. People in Seville are very, very outdoor motivated. They live their lives on the streets and spend their time in bars. So, Paul, tell us about you. Where are you from? What's your background and why Seville?
I'm from the west of Scotland. Came to Seville about 25 years ago now, after getting bored of working in London and looking for a new country, new place to live. Knew I didn't want to go to Madrid or Barcelona, and I was torn between Seville and Valencia, and plumped for Seville, where the famous for its women and its oranges, I believe.
Well, yeah, they don't put that in the guidebooks. So, Mark, what's the best thing about living in Seville?
I think the best thing is the work-life balance. I think Andalusia in general has a very relaxed attitude. People in Madrid think people in Seville or Andalusia are lazy, but I think it's just they have a better appreciation of enjoying themselves and not focusing just on their jobs.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, people put a great emphasis on enjoying life here. People will go out, they'll smile, they'll laugh, they'll joke, they'll have fun. And there is definitely that feeling in other parts of the country that people down here are lazy, but the actual statistics don't bear that out. People work longer hours, they have less time off sick. So it's almost a work hard, play hard mentality, I think.
And I think you talked about the weather earlier, and the reality is I've worked here in July and August, and it's very difficult to do a long day. Most companies have short hours in the summer because when it's 45 degrees, it's impossible to do 10-hour days.
Yeah, you adapt to your surroundings, don't you? Paul, best thing about Seville?
Very simple thing. The sky, seeing a blue sky every day when you leave your front door just brings happiness to people.
Yeah, it definitely makes a difference. Probably get about 20 days of rain a year, maybe a little bit more or less, but it's generally clear skies.
1 month in Scotland, no?
Every month in Scotland, I think.
Every day. Yeah. Okay, so Seville is obviously, as I said, the capital of Andalusia. Now, Andalusia is the most populous region of Spain, and Sevilla being its capital means obviously it's the most important city here. And as we've said, the people are very, very passionate. The passion obviously extends to football. We have 2 football clubs in the city, Sevilla Football Club and Real Betis Balompíe. Now, the first of those clubs to appear was Sevilla Football Club in 1890, although it has been disputed that was their formation, because originally their formation was 1905. But documents were uncovered in 2012 that showed evidence that Sevilla were formed in 1890 and played their first match against Recuelva de Huelva. who are also in Andalusia, around an hour from Seville, who were the first football club in Spain. And it was the British that brought football to Huelva. There was a big British presence in the mines there. And obviously this quickly spread to Sevilla, where British, but mainly Scots, formed Sevilla Football Club in 1890 to celebrate Burns Night. So Mark, you said before you're a season ticket holder at Sevilla. Why Sevilla? Why not Betis? What made you decide on Sevilla Football Club?
It was actually a couple of things. My first game in Seville was actually, I went Betis v Barcelona when Messi broke the goal scoring record for one calendar year.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe 2012. And the year after, I decided to get a season ticket, and I really didn't know which club to pick. And I was living in the Alameda, which is an area of Seville, and the C2 bus stopped 20 metres from my apartment. So for travel, it was easier to go to Sevilla. And also, being a Palace fan, now Palace are kind of an established Premier League club, but for most of my life, we've been a yo-yo club. And that season where I was picking a team to get the season ticket for, Betis got about 17 points, I think, that season. I've had enough of shit football. My plan was only to have a ticket for a year, and I thought I'll have a year of watching European football and watching some good football rather than having supporting two crap teams.
Yeah, I know where you're coming from. So for me, I'm a Bristol City fan. From Bristol, obviously, there's no other reason why I support them. If it wasn't for that, it's not the glamour and the success of down at Ashton Gate, because it's been lacking a lot. But full disclosure here, I'm also a Real Betis fan, Real Betis season ticket holder, and I chose Betis for the opposite reason. I chose Betis because being a Bristol City fan, I didn't want to go for the obvious team, the team that was winning the European trophies, etc. So I went for that. Although it turns out that things are changing at the moment, but we shall see how things develop. So, Paul, why Betis? Why not Sevilla like Mark?
Well, when I first came, both Betis and Seville were yo-yo clubs going up and down from the Primera to the Segunda.
So this was about the late 90s?
Late 90s, yeah, 1999, before Seville went on to all their successful years. But for me, Betis just always had much more appeal, culturally, politically. It seemed to be something that I could identify more. They always said that Seville was the team for the establishment, whereas Betis was a slightly more alternative club. And also, being from Scotland and being a Celtic fan, there was big connections between Celtic and Betis. Shirt colour being a nice, simple, obvious reason for supporting them. Another reason I couldn't support Seville was because of way back in the 80s when Jock Wallace and Ted McMinn were playing for Seville, and being ex-Rangers, I couldn't really see myself supporting that team. You look for little reasons to these things.
This is the thing. So Real Betis play in green and white, which is also the colour of the Andalusian flag. This isn't the reason why Betis play in those colours. One of the founders of Betis went to Scotland to a Catholic school to improve his English, and it was run by brother Winifred, who formed Celtic. So he used to go to Celtic games. And when he formed a football club here in Seville, he wrote to Celtic asking if they could have some shirts. And they duly obliged with some green and white hoop ones, which they changed to stripes. So yeah, there's an element in the colours there. And Paul, you said you're a Celtic fan. All of the Rangers fans that I know here in Seville, not a huge amount of them, but the ones that I do know, they're all Sevilla fans because they can support a team in green and white. So the colours are a big thing. Obviously, there's the connection with ex-Rangers players there as well. Now, Mark, there's a saying here that is Sevilla is el equipo de pijos and Betis is el equipo de gente, which basically translates as Sevilla is the team of the posh, Betis is the team of the people. What's your take on that?
Well, obviously, I'm not very posh. But when I was doing some studying, I did an article about football under Franco, and there's a lot of evidence that Betis fans will disagree with that shows that in the 40s and 50s, Betis spent a lot of time playing friendlies in the villages around Seville, and that's how they got their fan base around the city. So I would say it's probably a historic myth that's a very nice story that's kind of over years, the myth has become more of a reality as people see the clubs as pijo and more working class.
I suppose you could also say at the beginning, Seville was the only club in town when they started. Betis formed after Seville, And I think when Betis formed as well, they always said it was a kind of more traditional working class fan base, and going back to saying that Seville was the establishment team.
I mean, originally when Sevilla was formed, it was the establishment that were there. The reason why a lot of these debates come about, I mean, in the city, there's this thing called guasa. Okay, so the people here, it's very much about having fun, making fun of each other, taking the piss out of each other, basically, and they call it guasa. And part of guasa, this is part of the guasa, that Sevillistas are very posh people from the high ends of society, and that the Beticos are more real, they're more working class. But there is an origin of the formation of Betis that does buy into this narrative a little. And that is, it's said that one of the formers of what became Real Betis was actually a director of Sevilla Football Club who walked out to form a new club because the board wouldn't sanction a working class player signing from Triana, which at that time was a very working class barrio in the city. So it was seen as an establishment club who were against working class people. They weren't of the right character to play for the football club. But as you say, Paul, if you've only got one club, and in those days as well, the chances are that it's going to be establishment anyway. We also have the fact that you've got the Biris Norte at Sevilla, who are very much, they're the ultras group. They're very much associated with the left wing politics, and they have banners about fighting for the working class and that kind of thing. What's your take, Mark, with regards to Sevilla fans in general? Because the traditional narrative goes along the lines of Sevilla is the right-wing establishment club, Betis is the working class left-wing club, former Prime Minister of Spain was a Betis fan and he was left-wing party, etc. But then you've got this dichotomy where the main supporters group, the ultras group at the Sanchez Pizjuan are very, very left. So what's the fan base like general, do you think?
I mean, I think for both clubs it's quite mixed in general. I mean, both stadiums are in relatively wealthy areas. Certainly when they were built, they were kind of surrounded by big housing. The fans that sit around me, I'm sat in a kind of mid-level price ticket range. People have reasonably good jobs because a lot of people in Spain can't afford football tickets. That's the reality. But it's mixed, I think.
Yeah.
I think, again, it's a bit of a myth that's...
I think it's the same at Betis. It's a mixed crowd, but there is that weird thing where Betis kind of identifies itself as working class, but the ultras in Betis are right-wing, and the opposite in Seville. I'm not sure how the ultras get their political affiliations, because an awful lot of it seems to be rival teams, and you have to be the opposite of whatever your rival team. So Atletico Madrid is right-wing, and Seville has to be left-wing, and therefore Betis has to be right-wing, and etc., around the whole of Spain.
Yeah, there seems to be an element of that. I think also as well, it can just depend on who the leaders, what their views are, political views.
Quite possible.
And everyone has to fall into line, because it's kind of like the ultras culture. It's something we'll look at on an upcoming episode, but the ultras culture is kind of like, it's like a gang mentality. I think there was a quote from someone in Italy that said something along the lines of ultras are ultras until they get a girlfriend, which I thought was quite amusing. There's a lot to admire about the ultras and what they bring to the stadiums and stuff, but also obviously there's things to criticise as well. So yeah, it can depend upon a variety of factors as to the politics of the ultras groups. And yeah, mixed. I mean, I teach English here and I've taught some very, very wealthy Betis fans, and I've seen some very, very poor Sevillistas around the city. So it's
even within families, it can be divided between Betis and Seville.
Which I think is one of the... There's not many cities in the world that have the two-team situation in the city. It's one of the good things about Seville and the football in Seville.
Well, that's another thing as well. Is one thing you notice here compared to other places in Spain is everyone is Sevilla or Betis. It's not like I'm from Bristol and there's Bristol City fans and there's Rovers fans, but you'll walk around Bristol and you'll see shirts of Manchester United, Arsenal, Man City, you name it, all of the big clubs. But here, everyone seems to support Betis or Sevilla and the national team. You don't really see Barcelona shirts. You don't really see Real Madrid shirts on adults. You might on kids because they're into the players, but you'll see that very rarely. And usually they're people that from other places wearing that. I think it is a great thing, isn't it, that people support those teams?
I don't think there's another city in Spain that's got the size of Seville with just the two clubs. I mean, even Madrid, mostly Real Madrid and Atletico, but you've still got Getafe and Rayo Vallecano. And then in other cities, Barcelona are significantly bigger than Espanyol.
Yeah.
Valencia are significantly bigger than Levante. Whereas Sevilla, Betis, more or less, they're the same size. Betis Stadium's bigger, but Sevilla's is big as well. Sevilla have been a little bit more successful in recent years, but Betis, they're more or less in the same group of clubs. They're kind of the second level behind the biggest clubs in Spain.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, they are two big clubs within a city which is the fourth biggest city in Spain, but it's not a huge metropolis. It's the size of Bristol. It's the size of a Sheffield, for example.
Again, it's something that's grown as well. Like the teams 20 years ago when they were yo-yoing up and down in the Primera and the second division, the crowds were more like 20, 25,000 rather than the kind of 50,000 that you get at Betis these days.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at it as well. Sanchez Pizjuan holds around 42,000, Betis 60,000. So Betis, I think from last season, from memory, for a La Liga game, the lowest attendance I think last season was 48,000, but it's usually between 50 and 55. Derby, it's a full house. Sevilla's crowds, I'm not too sure. What were they last season, Mark?
I don't know. My guess is the average would be late 30s.
Late 30s,
I mean, in Spain's different from the UK in that Spain, they measure the numbers of people that actually go to the match, whereas in the UK, they include season ticket holders that don't attend.
Don't go,
so
yeah.
The attendances in Spain are they're more realistic.
Yeah, on who comes in. So you add that together then. So you've got, let's just round it up. So you say 40,000 at Sevilla, 60,000 at Betis. So that's more or less 100,000 people watching football matches in a city with a population of 680,000.
It's always the impressive statistic I always think.
Which is impressive. Yeah. But there's another aspect to it as to what divides the club, because there's also a narrative. So we've got the establishment, the rich narrative with Sevilla on one side. We've got the poor, left-wing Betis narrative on the other side. But there's also another slight narrative as well, that Sevilla is the team of the city of Seville, and that Betis is the team of Sevilla province, or wider, the team of Andalusia. I think there might be something in this, because if you go down to Cadiz, you see Betis shirts. You don't really see Sevilla ones. I've seen Betis shirts in Malaga, in Almeria, not really seen any Sevilla ones on local people. So there might be something in that, but what's your take on it, Mark? Would you say Sevilla is the team of the city, or is it wider than that?
I think the city's pretty much 50-50. I mean, I don't have figures for that, but I think it's pretty much 50-50. And I think, as I said, the Betis put a lot of effort in the late 40s and 50s when Real Madrid were doing their international tours and football was looking to expand. Betis very cleverly did a lot of friendly matches in the villages in Andalusia, and they made fans, and now those grandchildren of those fans are Betis fans.
I think it also ties into the politics about it. I think Betis is more Peña Béticas, social clubs in different towns and cities in Spain. I think it's up there with Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid. Can't remember whether Betis is third or fourth. And they say that is because of all the kind of working class people that had to emigrate from Andalusia in the 40s, 50s, 60s and moved to Catalonia and to the north of Spain and to Madrid and set up their peñas in their new towns.
That's it, yeah, that's the thing. So in the 50s and 60s, Franco, who obviously, as you're probably aware, was the dictator of Spain, he moved a lot of the industry from the south, Andalusia, up to the north, Catalonia, País Vasco, the Basque Country, Spanglish, switching between languages, to basically try and dilute those local languages and get people speaking Castilian or Spanish as we know it up in those regions, so that those other languages, Catalan, Basque, would hopefully die out. So where did people move for work from Andalusia? Because it's, despite being the most populous region and the largest landmass region, it's also the poorest region in the country. So a lot of people went up there for work. And yeah, it could well be true that at that time, it would predominantly have been Betis fans that left because they were from that demographic at the time. They kept that tradition on. So Hector Bellerin's an example of that.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's from Barcelona. His dad was born in Barcelona, but his grandparents came from down here. So his dad got it passed down from his family, and then he's passed it on to Bellerin, and then Bellerin's ended up coming to Betis to play for his dad's team. That's an example. And yeah, I think I read somewhere that in Catalonia, the club, obviously with the most peñas, is Barcelona, and the club with the second most peñas is not Espanyol, not Girona, not Gymnastic Tarragona, but it's Real Betis. So that's an interesting one. But what do you think, Paul, in terms of within the city, the split 50-50?
Yeah, it seems pretty much 50-50. I remember the support for Seville going up when they were winning all their Europa Leagues, and obviously lots of the kids were wearing Seville tops at that time. But now there seems to be much more of a balance. I think it's hard to get statistics or anything firm about which is more popular. I think it's something that both sets of fans will just argue about.
Yeah, but that's all part of the guasa, isn't it? That's what makes it all interesting. It's difficult to tell, isn't it? I mean, you see a lot of kids, younger kids. I mean, one thing you've got to bear in mind, and we'll go back to this. So, I mean, you mentioned this earlier, Paul. So you look at the history of the two clubs, two big football clubs with big fan bases, but they didn't really achieve much. I mean, Betis got their first and only La Liga title in the 1930s. Then Sevilla got theirs in the 1940s. If you look at the history, Sevilla slightly in front of Betis, one or two cups more in general, more time in the Premier Division in general. But broadly speaking, not that much more successful. And then it all changes with the appointment of Monchi as sporting director. So Mark, how did Monchi change Sevilla from a club that was often finishing 12th in La Liga or fighting a relegation battle or whatever, to being a club that was consistently winning the Europa League?
That's a big question, and it's before I lived here. But I think he was good at picking players. Sevilla are one of the clubs that nearly all clubs do now, where they bought young and then they sold these players on to Real Madrid and Barcelona, and they would buy 2 or 3 players with the money they made from selling these players on. And they did it for about 20 years. And then the cup success helped, and then it kind of snowballs from there. I think once you're established as a club that's good for young players to come to, young players want to come to you.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. I mean, Monchi, if you look at, maybe Sevilla should actually have a before Monchi and after Monchi. If you look at before Monchi and after Monchi, Sevilla are having their troubles at the moment, which we'll look at in a future episode. But you think of someone who's 20 to 25 years old, they've lived through the greatest period in the club's history. Going back to 2006, we're talking almost 20 years, 18 years. They've lived through the most successful period in the history. Probably couldn't imagine the fact that Sevilla had been in the second division in the 90s.
I think that's part of, there's a lot of protests at the moment at Seville. The last game of the season, there was about 12,000 people that didn't take their seats till the 10th minute. A lot of those are people that have grown up with success, and now they're not necessarily seeing it, and it's more difficult to handle.
This was something like with Sevilla friends I was saying, there was a lot of complaining about the standard of football under Lopetegui when they were second. And I was kind of like, what do they want? This is not bad. The football might be a bit boring, but second in La Liga. Whereas you look at some of the finishes in the 90s, Sevilla were stuff like 10th, 13th, 15th.
Sevilla, Betis and Atletico Madrid were the teams relegated in 2000, was it? 2001?
I think that was my first season going to watch Betis, was when all 3 of those, the big ones, went down.
99-2000, yeah. A crazy season.
I was going to say as well, the fact that Seville have been so successful in the last 20 years makes it quite surprising that both teams, or maybe even Betis, have more season ticket holders or more members of the club than they had previously, despite their lack of success.
Well, this is the interesting thing about Betis. So, as we touched on before, Betis won their only La Liga title in the 1930s. And then after the Spanish Civil War, when football resumed, Betis got relegated to the second division. And then they went down again. Now, in Spanish football, the top 2 divisions are professional, and then it goes regional from the 3rd division to below. It's nothing like England, where the league's a lot deeper. Betis ended up in a situation where they were playing teams like Utrera, which is a town which is around 30 minutes on the train away from Seville. But it's kind of like, I don't know, how can I compare it in English football, say? If we could imagine Manchester City go into non-league and play in Altrincham. That's kind of like the embarrassment level there. And during this period, a lot of fans stayed loyal to Betis. And this is where Viva el Betis Manqui Pueda comes from, which means long live Betis even though you lose. So Betis has a very loyal fan base, despite quite often not living up to perhaps where they should be for the size of club that they are.
I think that's also one of the cultural differences between the clubs, is that Betis has Manqui Pueda. Hey, even if we lose, we're still going to have a good time. Whereas Seville fans seem more demanding of their club, and it's like, we want success, we want more success, which is a different way of looking at football rather than just the whole guasa, having fun and thinking too much.
Yeah, that's true in other countries, isn't it? It's definitely true here. But when you're used to success and you grow up with it, suddenly it's taken away and everything feels a bit harsh.
What's the fan base like at Sevilla in that sense then? Because I remember this was a class I had a week later, and I was asked, Sevilla or Betis, and I said Betis, and he said, why? And I said, well, Manky Puedo. And he just said to me, he said, Sevilla cares about winning trophies. Betis just care about how many fans are in the stadium. There's a few comments like that I've had, which sometimes gives maybe I'm being unfair, but maybe gives the impression that Sevilla fans demand a little bit more, maybe.
I suspect there is that group of people. I'm a Palace fan, so I've watched a lot of shit football in my life. I don't have to pretend that I've only seen good football. There is a lot of people that get very angry. Under Lopetegui, the football, West Ham fans are going to discover this season the football's quite poor under Lopetegui. I go to football to be entertained. To be honest, I'm a 10-minute walk from the stadium, and there is a lot of people that walk out or get very angry after 15, 20 minutes of a match. I don't know if that's different to other clubs or not. I'm not sure.
I wouldn't say it happens at Betis. People might leave 5 or 10 minutes before the end, but everyone does seem to go there to enjoy themselves, I think, to...
Rain. I've seen them leave when it's raining, but there's no roof at the Benito Villamarín for much of it, and it's not pleasant, so I kind of get that.
I mean, the rain in Seville is... people treat rain in Seville like it's like acid or something, don't they?
Yeah.
It's a poisonous substance that people don't like to get on them.
This is another thing here, is it doesn't rain much, but when it does, rain stops play. The culture is outdoor. Everyone likes to be outdoors in bars, being social, but when it's raining, everyone stays at home.
I mean, the umbrella thing at football is a strange phenomenon.
It's a strange one for me as well, yeah.
You see at Seville, even if it's a few spits of rain, 20,000 umbrellas go up. And they have the big golf umbrellas as well. People get the golf umbrella in the eye. If you did that in England, I think people would be burning your umbrella.
We're not allowed though, are we? Because we can use them as weapons in England, to be launched.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, because they don't let you take water bottles with a cap on it, or you have to go through the lie of putting the cap in your pocket before you walk into the stadium and then screwing it back on.
Oh, do you guys do that? We don't do that at Betis. Cities are so conniving.
No, it's the same with Betis. You have to take the tops off.
No, but do people conceal them in their pocket and then put it back on?
Anybody can do if they want to.
Maybe I'm just too honest. That's not my problem.
In the olden days, we used to bring a 6-pack of Cruz Campo and a bottle of whiskey or something in the back of your pants.
Well, it's all changed now, unfortunately, because the booze ban in the stadium. I saw a guy here at half-time who asked for a beer, and the girl said to him in Spanish, there's no alcohol in it, and he didn't understand. So I said to him, she's telling you there's no alcohol in that. And he just went, oh, no, I don't want it then. And then she smiled, and then she said to me, I always have to tell the tourists this because they don't realise there's no alcohol in it, and they never want it.
I sit about 10 metres from the away fans, Sevilla, when they're playing in Europe and they're playing a German, English, French team. And you can see people walking into the stadium with 15 beers, and they clearly have no idea that it's alcohol.
Yeah, that's one of the things that can make Spanish football's great, and watching Spanish football's great, but one of the things that can be a bit off-putting is the fact that there's no alcohol in the stadium like in England. And I was surprised to see in Italy you can drink in your seat.
It seems really bizarre as well, given that most matches, the vast majority of people there are home fans anyway. You don't get the travelling support like you do in other countries. And given that everybody drinks outside the stadium before they go in,
I mean,
you wonder.
The 20,000, 30,000 people doing botillon before a match, literally 50 metres from the stadium, does make it pointless, really.
Yeah, and so for the uninitiated, botillon is basically to buy bottles of beer or spirits or any alcoholic drink and drink it in the street, basically, which is a nice, cheap alternative to going in a bar. Although drinks aren't particularly expensive here compared to other European countries, but again, wages are a bit lower, so people don't quite have the money. And the botillon's nice, the weather's good, it's not raining, why not stand in the street and have a drink? Okay, so we said before, you can have Betis fans and Sevilla fans within the same families. I remember a taxi driver saying to me, he was a Sevilla fan, but his whole family were Betis, and he hates Betis, but he was very proud of the fact there were two teams in the city that had passionate fan bases and that people didn't support Real Madrid and Barcelona and supported their local club. So there's definitely that pride that you can be in the same family with people who are Sevilla and Betis. However, that's not to say it doesn't spill onto more violent sides of things. So there was, I think, Mark, was there at Sanchez Pizjuán in the past during a derby, security guards were attacked and I think a goalkeeper was attacked with a lighter.
This was before my time. I mean, I know Juan Ramos was hit with the water bottle.
That was it, Betis. Yeah, that was it, Betis.
Which is the reason now you can't have the caps on the bottles. But
I think there was a corner flag or a big stick was thrown at somebody else. Or
Juan Jordan got hit with the flag from the Betis Ultras, didn't he, in the Copa del Rey match?
Yeah, the flag
3 seasons ago.
But I do remember watching Dani Alves in one of the derbies many years back. And a bottle was going towards him, must have landed at least kind of like 5 metres away, and he went down like a sack of potatoes. It was like...
A lot of play acting goes on in the derbies. The derbies are often off the pitch. The atmosphere is fantastic with the tifos, the noise of the fans, the bottle-yons take on an extra level, pyro, etc. Great experiences, but the games themselves are often not particularly great. Lots of sendings off, lots of play acting, lots of fouling.
Last season, the matches were poor.
Oh, last season, the season before, every season,
The last probably outstanding one was when Betis beat Sevilla 5-2 in Seville when they scored. The guy that sits to my right, he always has 3 packs of pepas. Pepas are sunflower seeds, but still in their shell. And it's a very popular thing for people in Seville to eat. And he just opened his first pepas, sat down, Betis scored, and he was like, oh, hostia, which is fuck. That was, I think, the last really classic game in the derby. I can't remember.
Yes, so many of them are absolutely terrible. There's a fantastic atmosphere before the game, and then as soon as the referee blows his whistle, it just gets into a scuffly, malicious, niggly... I would obviously blame Seville for that rather than Betis, who tried to play good football, but...
It's like Juan Miranda. The word is that he's a really nice, respectable young man. And yet he went in, studs on chest, on Jesus Navas in the Sanchez Pizjuan, straight red. And I was like watching it in a bar, and obviously I'm a Betis fan, like just what are you doing? You're going off straight away. And it's like, it just turns people crazy.
But it is like almost as if it's not like kind of Rangers and Celtic or something where there's kind of an animosity between the fans always inside and outside the stadium. I think in Seville it tends to be focused on the 90 minutes in the stadium, and then the next day everyone forgets about it, goes to work with their colleagues, etc., etc.
The Sevilla Betis match this year in the Sanchez Pizjuan, I saw a guy I hadn't seen for about 10 years. I taught him many years ago, and he was gone towards the Betis fans before the match. He was giving them the finger. And I was like, oh, what are you doing? And he said, oh, no, I'm just like my paddle partner. Is it the Betis stand? And you get that a lot. You see people like giving people the finger and shouting stuff at them, but then they're taking photos of each other. And
this is the weird thing. So it's just pure hatred during the 90 minutes towards the two sets of fans. And you think, I mean, it does spill into violence sometimes, but I mean, obviously Wandy Ramos was hit with a frozen bottle on his head from the top of the stand. But it's like, when I went to the Sanchez Pizjuan for the derby and I was in the Preferenza, a friend of mine got me a free ticket. I was like, stood out there just watching the hymn at the beginning. And there was a couple sat there. And the girl was wearing a Betis shirt and the lad was wearing a Sevilla shirt. And they just had their arms around each other. I took a photo, posted it on Instagram because I just thought it was a nice image. Derby day, the two of them, they had their arms around each other, you know, it was like very nice. And I walked past them and I tapped the girl on the shoulder and her boyfriend was there looking as well. Tapped her on the shoulder and I just pulled my Betis season ticket out of my pocket, showed it to her, and just put my finger, went, shh, and he just started laughing and he shook my hand. There's a lot of hatred, but at the same time, there's like the guasa, there's a good banter about it as well. It's
skin deep, the hatred, I think. Is.
I think there's more dislike towards Barcelona and Real Madrid fans that are in the stadium in Sevilla ends during matches than there are Betis.
Now, that's interesting because I've noticed when there's been people with Real Madrid or Barcelona shirts, in the end, it's Sevilla games that I've gone to that happens. There's often people when we play Real Madrid or Barcelona that will be in the home ends wearing those shirts, and I don't really see that animosity towards them. They're kind of left alone at Betis. Would you say that's fair?
More or less, it depends. I suppose, you know, if Madrid go ahead and they're jumping about and celebrating, everyone will be, calm down a little bit, sit yourself down, but nothing happens. It's just slight animosity towards them.
Yeah, nothing happens. I think there's an understanding in Seville that if you're a Sevilla fan, there's going to be Betis fans around, whereas why support Real Madrid and Barcelona if you live in the city?
Yeah, it's the same with Betis. I think fans have the same attitude as...
I wonder if the hatred of Real Madrid and Barcelona on the Sevilla side is linked more to the fact that they've been rivals for trophies. Whereas Betis haven't really had that.
But
No, but in terms of
closer, maybe. Yeah.
You've played them in finals. You're around the. So even when Sevilla hasn't qualified for the Champions League, whatever, Sevilla are often near the top. The last 20 years, they've been up near the top. Whereas Betis might have been in the second division, not in La Liga, or near the bottom in a relegation battle, or just sleeping in mid-table or whatever. Whereas there's been cup finals against those clubs.
That is possible.
Again, it probably goes back to Seville fans' expectations of the club and always expecting them to compete with.
Yeah, the reality is the results against Barcelona and Real Madrid are not great for Seville in the last 10 years. There's very few positive results. I think Jovetic scored a winner in the 94th minute with maybe his first touch for the club 7-8 years ago. But generally, Sevilla lose 1-2. Messi had a ridiculous goal scoring record against Seville.
I think he scored a few against Betis as well, including probably the best goal I've ever seen at the Betis Stadium. The one where he lobbed the keeper from the 18-yard box.
Yeah, now that one was part of the banter online. So Betis fans applauded, didn't they, when he scored that goal?
Yeah.
And the Sevilla fans were like, well, that's the difference between you and us. We wouldn't applaud an opposition goal. Like,
I would totally agree with that.
They were kind of like, we wouldn't do that kind of thing. And I thought that was quite interesting. It's just like, oh, you're just Betis fans. You just accept a great goal against you, or whatever. But
we appreciate good football.
Well, yeah. How many years there might not have been that much of it. Although at the moment, European football 4 years in a row under Pellegrini. It was a good time to be a Betis fan. Now, this is a shocking statistic. This season, Betis has now done 10 seasons in a row in La Liga. Or next season will be, I think. And this is the first time it's happened. The most they've managed is 9. So if you can imagine a club the size of Betis with the fan base that it's got, 50-odd thousand fans every week, in a situation where they haven't managed more than 9 seasons in a row in the top division, it's quite shocking, really.
I didn't know that. That is surprising, really. In Spain, there's only really 8, 10 big-ish clubs. You would think they would have had a bigger run than that. And when you think Athletic Bilbao have never been relegated.
Exactly, and a small pool of players to choose from. They've never had that situation. Betis have gone down way too many times. When they've been relegated after, there's been situations where they've qualified for I'm not sure if it was qualified for the Champions League or qualified for the Europa League and then got relegated the following season.
It was the Champions League.
Champions League, yeah, exactly.
Well, and there was the season Sevilla beat Betis in the Europa League in the knockout on pens.
The most miserable game I've ever been to was that match.
I watched that match in a bar near Las Setas, and there was a Betis fan with a Betis tattoo on his neck, quite a big man, and everyone was a little bit worried when Sevilla won, and to be fair to him, he finished his canya, his small beer, and left. Do anything. He looked like he was prepared to cause a bit of trouble.
If you go online on YouTube, you can find a Sevilla Betis derby at the Sanchez Pizjuan from the 90s. I think it was the mid-90s. And there's some guy in a Betis shirt, and the camera follows him. It's like a little documentary on the rivalry. And the camera follows him, and he comes out. He's in the Gol Norte where the beers are. So it's basically the prime area for the ultras. And he comes out holding a beer, wearing a Betis shirt. Walks out of the little tunnel thing where you come from under the stands. And at which point, a hail of abuse rains at him. He turns around with his beer and his Betis shirt and looks at them and says, "What? Por qué? Por qué? Why? What? What's the problem?" And it's just like... Obviously, like it's like being a Man United fan and walking in on the cop. There's going to be a problem. And then the police come over and they escort him and deal him out there. But it was just total madness to think that that's a good idea. I'm surprised he managed to get through the turnstile because he was just wearing a Betis shirt. He wasn't concealed or anything. But yeah, all very odd.
A Sevilla fan told me several years ago that the animosity between the two clubs changed significantly after Antonio Puerta died.
Right.
So Antonio Puerta was a Sevilla player. He played once for Spain. He came through the youth team with Jesus Navas and Ramos, and he had a heart attack on the pitch and then died a couple of days later in hospital. And on the 16th minute of every match, Sevilla fans applaud him and sing his name in every league match. I was told that there was a change between kind of a violent rivalry to a kind of friendly rivalry. That was maybe the moment, the tipping point that changed things.
Yeah, I mean, So I'm from Bristol. People probably don't think about the Bristol Derby so much. It was like Paul being a Celtic fan, Celtic Rangers. We all know about that and how passionate that is and how that can spill over. But Bristol...
It does spill over.
Yeah. And Bristol is a strong rivalry that people don't know so much because we don't play them that much, but we're lower division clubs, so it's not in the public eye so much. But the hatred in Bristol between the two clubs, and fights break out in the city centre between the two sets of fans sometimes on Friday, Saturday nights, not even football days. I couldn't imagine that happening here. You don't really see violence in the streets. I mean, I've lived there almost 4 years and I don't think I've seen one fight at the weekend or any day.
I've seen 2 fights and one of them was between 2 Scottish people.
Was that when Rangers were in? Yeah, there doesn't seem to be sort of violence that you get on the UK streets at the weekends or something. I don't know. But there's definitely a sense that when you're in the stadium at the derby, there's absolute hatred, but it's almost I think maybe for Sevillanos, it's just like, hold me back kind of thing. It's just like, I can be really horrible now and like really angry and really threatening because I know it's not going to go any further.
It's just theatre, isn't it?
There's one guy in his mid-30s that sits a couple of rows in front of me and he's always shouting things and he puts stuff on his phone to show signs to the away fans. But then 2-3 years ago when Sevilla played West Ham in the Europa League and West Ham fans were all over the stadium and he didn't say a word the whole match. He's definitely all mouth and no trousers.
Yeah, you need to know the reputations of the clubs you play. Okay, so let's wrap up this first edition of the Football Culture Podcast on Seville, football in Seville. So, Mark, if someone is thinking of coming to the city to sample a Sevilla game at the Sanchez Pizjuan, describe a match day at the Sanchez Pizjuan, and if they're coming, what should they do beforehand and what should they do on the match day?
I definitely think that anyone should come to Seville for a match, whether it's Seville or Betis. For Seville, I think you need to get there early. Try to pick a match that's going to be on a Saturday, which is not always possible with La Liga scheduling. But get there early, experience the Bottillon.
So I get there early in the stadium or outside the stadium?
Outside the stadium. And then get in early, enjoy the beeries giving abuse to the away team as they warm up. That's always a fun thing. Enjoy the sun. And then the atmosphere is normally very good in Seville. It's normally very good. If you really want to get the experience, go in North Stand, Gol Norte, because then you're going to get the most noise.
The beer is in there early enough to boo the away fans. What's the matter with them? They're ultras. They should be in a pub.
Most of them get in. For the Betis game, they're all in early. But for the big games, normally they like to give a bit of abuse to They make the away team warm up in front of the beeries.
Underhand tactics from Sevilla.
Do they do that at Betis? I've never noticed it, but then I don't get into the stadium until 10 minutes before the match.
Yeah, I'm usually still in the bar with you at that point, so I wouldn't know.
I'm normally in like 20-30 minutes before kick-off. I'm a big fan of being in early.
Well, one thing we should mention as well is don't do what me and Paul do. Do what Mark does and get in the stadium early, because both fans have a club hymn, and when the teams come onto the pitch, they play the music of the club hymn, and then as soon as the vocals kick in, they cut the music and both sets of fans sing it a cappella. And it's the only 2 clubs in Spain that do it. And it really is an impressive sight and an impressive thing to hear. Hairs on the back of the neck stuff. So it really is worth experiencing. So, Paul, if someone is coming down to Benito Villamarín for a Betis game, what do you recommend they do?
Probably similar to Seville. Go out for some beers beforehand, enjoy the atmosphere, have a look at the different bars around the stadium, and then get in just in time to hear the hymn is when I would recommend arriving at the stadium.
Yeah, sounds like a good plan. And just so you're aware as well, the Sevilla Stadium, the Sanchez Pizjuan, is quite close to the centre in Nervión. So it's walking distance from the centre, which most people would be staying in. Whereas Betis is down in Heliopolis, the Benito Villamarín a little bit out of the way, down in the south of the city. You can walk it in about 40 minutes. Or get a bus there. Although I would say the walk down the Avenida de Palmera is quite a nice walk. If you get the chance, you can walk by the river, and there's a couple of parks to stop off and have a beer in some of the bars in the parks as well. So that's definitely worth it. Okay, that's it for the first edition of the Football Culture Podcast, focusing on football in Seville. If you're interested in learning a little bit more after this episode about football in the city, I recommend the Copa 90 Derby Days documentary, Derby Days Sevilla, and also the Copa 90 documentary on Real Betis winning the Copa del Rey, which was called Once in a Lifetime. That's very good. And also the book by Colin Miller, The Frying Pan of Spain. Very, very good read about the 2 clubs, lots of histories, speaking to lots of fans, etc. in there. So that's worth looking at. And also as well, Glory Magazine. I think it's still available online. Glory Magazine did a special on football in Seville where they came to a derby at Benito Villamarín, and little plug, both me and Mark wrote articles for them in that magazine. So grab yourself a copy of that. Okay, thanks very much for listening. Like and subscribe, please. And also leave us some reviews because we want to hear your feedback. What do you want to hear more of? What did you like? What did you like? Thanks very much.